Number one fan. I'm your number one fan. Gotta understand. I got a plan. Go for what you want. Might be what you thought. You gotta take the chance. Gotta understand. I'm your number one fan. Number one fan.
Hello, everyone. Good evening, and welcome to another special edition here on the KSN Podcast. I'm your host, Kurt the Magnificent, and we got something coming on tonight, a guest coming on, and we're going to talk about the New York Knicks. If you haven't been watching, you need to start watching. These Knicks are really coming out here, and they're playing some basketball. And my guest coming on, diehard Knick fan just like me, been around watching this since the 70s. And let me tell you something, man. This dude he got a whole poster in the garden, man. You know, he got a whole message there, man. So you know he's been there for a long time. He's been on before. He's a season ticket holder as well. And this is a good friend of mine, man. Let's give it up for my man, Mr. Greg Armstrong. Yo, Greg, what up, Greg?
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me, Kurt. How you doing?
You know me, man. It's the Knicks. I know you don't understand right now this time of year and how they hooping. I'm right now. I'm amazed and I'm having a ball with it right now. How about you?
Yeah, man. Absolutely. I mean, we've been waiting for this for a long time. Break this 53-year championship drought. You know, seems like we got a great team that the whole city can rally around. It's been a few years process under Leon Rose, and it's looking good, man. I mean, they definitely have a chance to win this title. They're in the Final Four right now, looking good, coming off a sweep of the Sixers. Unbelievable win last night.
Yeah,
Coming off a
definitely.
9-day layoff, which I'm sure had something to do with the slow start. But at the end of the day, they got the victory. So it's really exciting times.
No, definitely exciting times. And like you said, you're running down through the playoff rounds and what we had to go through. You know, from the beginning and to where we at now. And it's amazing that with the Knicks, because the start of the season, everybody talked about, with the roster and setup, with Leon Rose, bringing in Mike Brown, getting Tibbs out. I love Tibbs, but at the same time, Mike Brown is showing, with adjustments and what he's been doing throughout the season into the playoffs, that he has made it where the Knicks must-watch TV. And right now, they got through the Hawks, which that was an emotional series. It was a roller coaster, but they found their niche. And then they got through the Philadelphia 76ers, which that is always a I-95 rivalry all the time, the Northeast corridor. And
Yes.
yeah, and again, getting through that, and then now with the Cleveland Cavaliers, which I actually wanted this matchup because I think this was supposed to be the matchup last year, and now we got it with a different roster, and I think actually a better roster than last year. And from the game one last night, we saw where again we had that 9-day layoff. We was resting, and they just came off of just a day rest from winning Game 7 against Detroit, which we were supposed to play. And now you play this game. The first 3 quarters is all Cleveland, basically. They have the lead. Fourth quarter, with about 8 minutes left, they up by 22. Donovan Mitchell hits the 3-pointer. He hits the 3. And I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to keep it real with you. I said it to my wife. I said, I think this might be it. I think that might have did it. But you know what? At the same time, she said something. She said, oh, what if where's Landry Shamet? Where's he at? Why he hasn't gotten the game in the second half? Sure enough, he gets in that game and start distracting D Mitch, like making sure he don't get no easy shots or easy baskets. And then Brunson going after Harden. And I've been waiting for that through the whole year. I was waiting for that. I was like, if they go after Harden, they can get some easy buckets. And Brunson did it. And he went on that huge run by himself. And then the Knicks started getting it going. And then Mikal Bridges hit 2 clutch 3-pointers. Shamit made some play, hit that huge bouncing 3 to tie the game. And I'm not gonna lie, that Merrill 3-pointer, I thought that was in. I'm not gonna lie to you, Greg. I
Man,
thought that was in. And listen, even Mike Breen was about to say bang, he had to stop.
yeah,
He knew.
yeah,
He was like,
man.
oh, hold on. Then we go to overtime and then we win the game. So it was beautiful. Talk about that, Greg, please.
Yeah. Well, coming off the 9-day layoff, like we talked about, the Knicks definitely looked like they came out flat in the beginning of the game. Their 3-point shooting was way off. I think they were 2 for 13 at one point, and everybody was off. Nobody was, making their shots. OG was coming back off the hamstring. That's another thing, So for him, it's probably going to take a game or two to find his rhythm. And yeah, it didn't look good. I mean, at the end of the third quarter, going half midway through the fourth quarter, it didn't look good. But the one thing about Mike Brown that I like is that he's willing to make adjustments that sometimes Tibbs, he would go down with the sinking ship. He would have just, ran the starters and not really looked for another bench option, somebody that could come in and really give them a spark.
Right.
And Josh Hart, he wasn't making his shots, so the
Mhm.
Cavs, they were putting a big on him and not really guarding him. They had Jared Allen ghosting him, and for the most part, he was like an extra defender to help out with everybody else, and they were just leaving Hart open. So when they inserted Shamit, that gave us 5 shooters on the floor, and that 5-out lineup. If you double Brunson, you're leaving the shooter open. And that's pretty much what happened there. So either Brunson's going to cook, or if he gets doubled, then he could just dish it off to Bridges, Shamit, or whoever. And, they made him pay. So I think that was a big point in the game when he made that adjustment.
Yeah, definitely. It was a huge adjustment, and you saw the whole thing shift. Once Shamit got in, the whole thing shift, and it opened up, like you said. And that's been the Knicks' offense since the Hawks series, or even a little before that, when the season was coming to an end, that Hawks game before the season ended. When they have the 5 out and the shooters out, you make it where you're driving or kicking. You have an open shooter set up and ready to go. And once that happened, again, Brunson started it. But once that really happened, you saw it. You was like, okay. And the comeback. Now, one thing about the Knicks, and I had a discussion with my cousin, and he was giving up on him. He told me before the game, he said Knicks is 6. Then in the third quarter, he said Cavs is 6. I said, what?
What?
Yeah,
No way.
he said because of that. I said, come on, man, you got to be kidding me. Next thing you know, right? They make the run, they come back, they tie the game, go to overtime. I said, you still thinking Cavs is 6? He was like, nah, I'm just saying. I said, well, you said it. He was like, I said, you didn't think they were going to come back? He was like, you didn't think so? I said, I know the Knicks. I know they're not going to give up. They're going to
Right,
try all they might to do what they can to just make it a game. They make it
right.
interesting. That's the Knicks forever. They always got to make it interesting. And they made it interesting.
Yeah.
And it's to the point where it went to overtime and then they ended up winning. So, again, talk about that, Greg, like how for history, the Knicks make things interesting.
Yeah, well, the Knicks always had teams that, if they get behind, they was going to make a comeback. But like in the old days, they would make these comebacks, and we would call them fake comebacks because we'd be down 30, then we'd cut it to 5,
Mhm.
but then we couldn't get over the hump. We couldn't get that, winning basket. But
Right.
now in this era of Knick basketball with Jalen Brunson, who's, the clutch player of the year last year, and still,
Yeah.
at the end of these games, he just finds a way to get it done. So, once you get it to a certain point, get it close enough, you have confidence that they could pull out the game. And that's pretty much what happened. When they were down 22, it looked bleak. I ain't gonna lie. I mean, did I think they were gonna come back at that point? No, but I still held out hope that if they could get it closer, make a run, and then, you put the ball in the captain's hand, anything can happen. And that's pretty much how it went down. When he hit that 3 and that got it to 5, I believe at the
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep. Uh-huh.
and then that's when I knew we got this.
Yeah.
I was pretty much, really confident that they could pull it out.
Most definitely, yeah. Like you said, when he hit that three, he was carving Harden up. But when he hit that three on him, I said, "Oh, we here. We here now. We good. We good.
Right.
We figured it out, and now we right there because now Cleveland can't hit shots. Now they kind of unraveled a little bit from what they had those first three quarters, and you know the Garden crowd. When you hear the Garden crowd through that TV, because again, you there at times, but when you hear it through that TV, you know the Knicks they there now. You know they're gonna figure it out and or make it to where it comes down to the last second shot or a last that last possession shot. And the best part about that, you start seeing the crowd get into it. The alumni, like you see Stephon Marbury, who was in a beautiful, beautiful suit last night. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I was like, yo, I was impressed. Beautiful suit. He's out there on the floor getting to the baseline. John Starks always there. He's hyped up. He almost looked like he hit Evan Mobley with a fist punch on that 3-pointer that Sherman hit. Like everybody, Pat Ewing and LJ doing the. You remember when the Knicks they got a foul or air one, they used to do the double clap, the double tap with the hands. Yeah, I see when LJ and Pat you there. I said, oh yeah, they engaged now. So it's just great to see the Knicks what they're doing, and they building their own culture. And I think the older generation and this new generation is loving what they're seeing from this organization.
Yeah, they're doing a good job. I got to give Leon Rose and his crew a lot of credit for bringing around a lot of the old Knicks, bringing them back into the fold. And it really is giving the current team a lot of confidence knowing that these guys who've been there, what they're doing now, are backing them, So it's really good to see. You see Patrick there. And then, like you said, LJ Starks, Shumpert was back. He was in the building last night.
Yes.
So, I think that really goes a long way to build camaraderie within the organization. So it's really good to see.
Yeah, it is really good to see, man. I wish some more of them old Knicks come back, like get Charlie Ward up in there, man. Chris Childs, man. Get them dudes in there in a regular, Like I
Yeah,
wish they could figure out, get Oakley. Like have the talk, please, man. Like he need to
yeah,
be there too, man. Like have Oakley in there, man. Like we need him in there, you know. Oh man, we always got Allen Houston. He's there, what he does with his work. And there's other guys that definitely should be there, man, because they was a big part of that history of the Knicks, And now when you see this club coming in, and it really just it's fun to watch, man. Again, I'm happy to be a Knicks fan. I was there through them dark times, through them dark years, and I was there through some of them good years. And I always say this, I and friends and kids like we were growing up, used to clown me, talk about like you like the Knicks, man. Come on, man. The Knicks ain't gonna beat, they ain't gonna do nothing. And I'm like, don't worry, one day, man, this might be the year, Greg. What you think? This might be, we might get it from 73. We might finally have a chance.
yeah. I'm starting to feel that way. I mean, the way this team is coming together, ever since that second the loss against Atlanta at home in the Garden,
Hmm.
when Mike Brown made another adjustment and put the ball in Carl Anthony Towns' hands and made him a point center.
Yeah.
That was kind of a transition with this whole run because before that, the team appeared to be struggling a little bit, and they found a nice offensive rhythm. Moving Brunson off ball and getting other guys more involved. So ever since then, it seems like they've been on a roll. And those two blowouts, the one against Atlanta in the clincher, and the game against Philadelphia when they swept them, you know, you don't hardly see teams in the playoffs getting blown out by 40 points, 30, 40, 50 points. They really turned it up to the point where you're thinking to yourself, man, we may really have something there here. This team looks like a juggernaut when they're clicking on all cylinders. So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely.
so hopefully they can keep it going. We got 7 more wins to go to get there. Tomorrow night should be interesting. I know Cleveland, they know they let one slip. So,
Hmm.
they're gonna definitely try to come in there and steal one. That's always, the road team's agenda, try to win one out of the first two in the Garden. So, but I think the Knicks are going to be better prepared. Now that they got that little bit of rust out the way in game one, I expect them to be ready tomorrow night.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think that the what was it 4 for 20? I forgot the percentage on 3 pointers or before that run started, they were shooting terrible, and I can't see them in the beginning, the first half on game two shooting like that. I expect a higher percentage on shots, and I expect a better ball movement and getting guys engaged more, and for game two. And going back real quick, like you said with Atlanta and Philly, how they had those blowout games when they were blowing teams out. Now you're thinking, when is it going to happen with Cleveland? Was it the comeback to make that happen? What I'm saying? What game in this series is going to happen?
Right,
You know what I'm saying?
right.
So we hoping and waiting for that, and I hope they can get this so they can get the 2 games at home and then split in Cleveland. That's my thing. I always feel like if you at least get the home game and just split, those 3 and 4 or whatever how it is, then you have yourself a chance to win the series with the advantage. So I'm hoping that as well, Greg. I really am.
That's my plan too. I mean, I got my tickets ready for Game 5. So if they could do that, they'll be coming back to New York for Game 5, looking for the clincher.
Right.
So that'll be a nice gentleman's sweep. And then get a little bit of time to prepare for the winner of the OKC Spurs series, because it look like they're gonna have a knockdown, drag out war. Between those two teams, I can see that going 6 or 7 games.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, that'll give us a few days off, which is good, opposed to 9 days off. That might have been a little bit too much, but it
Mhm.
afforded us the time to get OG Anunoby healthy. So it turned out to be a blessing in disguise. But yeah, man, I think I could definitely see the Knicks wrapping up this series in 5, 6 games, the most. So
Right.
let's hope
Right.
for it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if the series, say if we did win the game 5, that would be next Wednesday actually. Then we will have, I think, a week, because I think the finals actually starts that following Wednesday. If I remember correctly, I think it's June 4th. I think it's June
I think
4th, if I
yeah,
remember.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yep.
So we will have a week again. So it's just like, okay, we still have that time, but you know what? Listen, it's the final. So, you know, it, I just feel like, at this point, when they were talking about how after we beat Philly, we waited for Cleveland, Detroit. I'm like, look, yeah, we're going to have the long drag. We're going to be waiting. Fine. But at least we waited for OG to have that rest to come back. And
Yeah,
also, those teams that's going to be battling, they're going to be tired. So you hoping for
yeah,
the Spurs and the Thunder, hopefully they get tired. So we can get a
absolutely.
couple games on them early to start out. So,
Absolutely, because the NBA playoffs is an endurance test. The team that usually wins is the team that's the more healthy. Going down the end of the season, and in past Nick runs, if you remember, even back to last year, Jalen Brunson, they wore him down, the Pacers, in the Eastern Conference Finals.
yeah,
They were Nick Thibodeau wasn't playing a lot of guys. The starters were playing heavy minutes, and once you get to this point of the season, all of these guys got some type of injury, some type of banged up,
mhm,
nicks or something. So the fact that we're wrapping up these series in quick fashion and getting some recharge time for the battery, that's a huge plus. That's part of the reasons that could help you win a championship, being fresh and, being ready to go for that next series.
definitely. I was gonna just make that point when you brought it. You made it perfectly. You brought it up right on time, because that's the difference from this season, from last season, even the last couple of years. That when Tibbs was running the show, he had those guys running ragged through the season. Well, logging minutes. They were logging more minutes. They were leading the league. I think it's like I think top 5 was 3 of the guys on the Knicks leading the league in minutes. And this year, you don't got that, because Mike Brown's been running that rotation. Getting other guys in. Like setting those guys up and having those starters rest, especially if we blowing out teams. He making sure, okay, we got enough lead. We gonna get these guys rest so we get ready for the next games. And with Mitchell, I don't know. I don't know who thought about it. They did a fine job of doing with Mitchell Robinson. They're dealing with him. Those back to backs. They make sure whatever game that they don't need him, they rest him. And I gotta give that coaching staff a bunch of credit. And one more point to go back to game 1 last night. I don't know if you remember this, but they had Alvarado starting the fourth quarter, right? Maybe 2 minutes in, Mike Brown took him right out the game.
Hmm.
And you see Alvarado walk into the bench and he's hot. He's mad.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and I see it. I was like, he mad because he ain't getting no bar, but he not doing nothing. He not
Right.
giving
Right.
us
Right.
nothing. That's why they had to bring, I think they brought Brunson back in a little early.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, because we needed that because we down 20. Well, we
Yeah.
were
Exactly.
probably we were close to down 20. Like you
Yeah.
need something, we need some spark. And we
Yeah.
didn't have that. And
Yeah.
I think that's again Mike Brown.
Yeah.
That was the decision, or whether the coaching staff made that decision. So I like that.
Yeah. He definitely he's shown more flexibility. I mean, nothing. I'm not nothing against Tibbs. Tibbs did a great job for us to get us to the point where he got us, but we needed somebody else to take us to that next level. And it seems like Coach Brown is more adaptable as far as like with lineups, giving guys an opportunity in the regular season. You saw Kolick take a jump this year. Muhammad Diawara gave us some good minutes. Now
Yes,
these guys are not playing now, but during the regular season, that afforded you the opportunity to rest your starters so that now this point of the season, they're not all burnt out. So definitely got to give coach a lot of credit for using more guys and keeping guys fresh and also keeping these bench guys ready so that when you do need them, they're not going in the game looking like they don't know what to do. So that's another
yeah,
positive of
definitely.
playing all your guys.
Yeah, definitely, big positive. Greg, I want to bring up. I want to go back from now, from 34 years ago to now.
Yeah.
I want to bring up. We've had 5 Eastern Conference matchups. All right, this is the fifth one since 1992. And it's funny because that was your first season. You started having season tickets and the Pat Riley era. And let's just go run down real quick from each one. So the 92 series was actually, everybody knows, was, oh no, sorry, sorry, sorry. I'm going to go back. 93, 92, 93 season. So 93 was the Chicago Bulls, and that went 6 games. But it's crazy. The Knicks got the first 2 games at home. And you're thinking back then, I know I'm asking you back then, you're thinking, okay, we got the first 2 games at home, and we go to Chicago, we just gotta get one. And
Yeah.
we couldn't get one in Chicago. Jordan had that crazy 50-point game, and then they come back to the Garden for game 5. And we all know what happened there. Charles
Yeah.
Smith. And
Yeah.
then, once that happened, it was just like we couldn't recover from that. And we lost in 6 games, right? So talk about your memory on that.
Yeah. Well, my memory from that series was, like you said, we went up 2-0, and in game two, that was the game with the Starks dunk,
Right, right.
right? Yeah,
Yep.
Starks.
Mhm.
So at that point, everybody's going crazy. We thinking that, oh, we got these dudes. We up 2-0, and there was a lot of talk in the media about Michael Jordan going to Atlantic City and gambling,
Yeah.
staying out till 1 o'clock in the morning or whatever it was.
Mhm.
And he got really pissed at that. He didn't
You
like
think
that.
you
They
think
were
it fueled
saying
him? Probably fueled him, right?
it did. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I believe so.
Hmm.
So then after that, that's when that next game, when they went to Chicago, and he had that terrific game. I think at that point, that's when they got their mojo back, and unfortunately, that pivotal game 5, when I was there for that game, and we should have won that game. But the key thing in that game, we missed. I don't know how many it was, but we missed so many free throws in
Mm,
that game that if we would have hit our free throws, it wouldn't have came down to that
to that.
last second possession with
Hmm.
Charles Smith. But the fact that he missed and then, you can't tell me he wasn't fouled there. But that's hard, to get that call in that spot, you know. But there was a time when I was really upset with him for that. But as time goes on, I let it go. But that was like a real low point in Nick history.
Yeah, definitely. The 94 series, all right. You got the Indiana Pacers, and Indiana wanted them back because they played them in the first round the year before in '93, and um, Reggie Miller had that huge game in game 5, with the 25 points in the fourth quarter. And you saw Indiana go 3-2 in that series. You think, oh man, here we go again, but the Knicks had a huge game in game 6. They able to pull away. They actually were down in that game and came back and won. And in game 7, down, I think it was down 1, and Starks went for the layup. Ewing tipped it in. They took the lead and then came down. Miller missed a shot. Foul. I don't know if you remember this. Remember the foul they called on Miller? They called it a flagrant foul, intentional foul on Starks. So Starks had to shoot free throws, and we got the ball back. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I
part.
remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
And that was
remember
big. That was big. Like,
Yeah.
basically, Indiana could have had a chance if that didn't happen. But, talk about that. Memories of that.
Yeah, my memories of that. When we lost that game 5, it was like kind of like everybody thought the Knicks had lost the series at that point.
Right.
Pivotal game 5 in the Garden, you lose on your home court. Now you're going back to Indiana, and that place was hell to try to win a game back then in Indiana. The crowd, it wasn't like today where the Knicks fans travel and you have like half the building.
Right.
Knicks fans, you go to Indiana, that's like Hicktown over there.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely.
And then I remember Spike Lee. He went to Indiana.
Mm-hmm.
He had a bet with Reggie Miller. He was saying that if the Knicks win, I'll put your wife, who was an actress in one of my films. But no, if the Knicks win, you got to go to prison to see Mike Tyson, who was in jail in Indiana at the time. But if they lose, because he was trying to drum up support for Mike Tyson.
Gotcha.
But if the Knicks lose, I will put your wife in one of my films, in my next feature film.
Gotcha.
And that game 6, John Starks had a huge game. He saved us, down the end of that game.
Yeah.
And I remember him dapping up Spike. That's one thing.
I remember that. I remember that. Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
So when they came back to New York, they got it back to New York for that game 7, I was like, yeah, we got this. We got it back to New York, and it was touch and go for most of the game. But when Ewing put that put back dunk in, and the Garden went berserk, and he jumped up on the scorer's table.
They arms up,
right?
Yeah,
With arms raised.
yeah.
That was our first conference finals victory since '73.
Right.
Since they won the champion, so that was big.
Yeah.
That was big.
Yeah. That was big. Big times. Matter of fact, Ewing had a good game, 24 points and 22 rebounds, if I remember correctly. So,
Yes.
99, lockout year. And we went through a lot. 8th seed, barely making it through. Cause I remember that season vividly, barely making it to 8th seed. We had to have a good stretch of games. And we get through that, get through Miami, a tough series or the other rivalry. Atlanta, we sweep them. And then we get to Indiana once again. And, of course, LJ with the 4-point play in the Garden part of it. But I think it was game 3. And then
Game 3.
those games just translated. We got the game 4, and then I think game 5 Indiana took it, but then we ended up winning game 6, if I remember correctly. So, talk about that, remembering those memories.
Yeah, 99 was a weird season because it was a lockout season. So the season it was only 50 games. So the Knicks, we had the squad, but it seemed like they could never get their footing. Like during most of the regular season, they struggled.
Yeah.
And then when it got down to the end of the season, I didn't even know, or most of us, we didn't know if they were going to make the playoffs or not. There was a point where they were like on the outside looking in with like a couple of weeks left in the season.
Yeah.
And then, Sprewell, he was coming off the bench and he didn't like that.
Yeah.
He wanted to start. So one of the key things that they did was Jeff Van Gundy, he started Sprewell toward the end of the season, and they caught fire. They started playing faster. You had Camby, you had Sprewell in Houston, and they just took off from there. when Allen Houston hit the shot in Miami, one of our legendary moments,
yeah,
that just catapulted them. And then when they went to Atlanta and swept them, and Camby had that thunderous dunk against the
yeah,
Hawks that every time I
yeah,
see him,
yeah,
I talk to him about. And it was just a great run because that year, we didn't expect it, because the way the regular season went,
right.
and for them to, they beat Indiana, and unfortunately Ewing got hurt in that
Yep.
series. If
In
you
the
remember,
series.
he
Yep.
had
The
the
first, I think
Achilles,
it was
right?
game 1 or game 2.
Yeah,
Yep. I
yeah,
remember. Yep.
right.
Yeah.
So, but they were still able to get through that. But by the time they got to the finals, we had no bigs for San Antonio, unfortunately. I mean, we had Chris Dudley
Yeah.
trying to check Duncan and
Those.
Robinson,
Yeah, I remember.
right?
Yeah. 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 I know.
And
I remember.
LJ, and I think LJ got hurt in that series too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. He just
you know,
wasn't the same. So
yeah,
yeah.
right. And then with
Yeah.
the back
Yeah.
issues and everything, we didn't have
Yeah.
enough,
Yeah.
But it was still that was a great run.
Yeah, definitely. And last but not least, last couple minutes before we go, the 2025 series last year, we get through, the first round, the second round through team Detroit. We got through Boston, which we were trying to be praying, finally got through, and then we get Indiana. And then game 1.
Yeah,
Everything looking good. We think we're gonna win. Of course, Halliburton hits that shot to go in overtime, and then we just never really recovered from that.
yeah, that's tough. That's like that reminded me of 2013, going a little bit back when we played the Pacers,
When Paul
and
George was there.
yeah, when Paul George and Roy Hibbert, when we
Hmm.
lost that, when
Yeah,
Melo, when we lost that series, we
yeah,
lost that game 1 at home.
yeah,
And when you lose that game 1, you lose that home court advantage right off the jump, which actually was something I was worried about last night. You don't want to do that. You
right.
want to win those first 2 games at home. So when I mean, we had that, and we had a comfortable lead most of the game, and Indiana, what's his name, got hot. The shooter for Indiana, I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
Hmm.
Um, he hit all those threes at the end of the game,
Hmm.
and Knicks was up by a lot, and then it came down to that final possession.
Neesmith. Yeah,
Neesmith,
yeah.
right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We thought the lead was insurmountable, and then he started knocking down threes. And we're like,
yeah.
wait a minute. Then all of a sudden, it came down to the last possession, and when that ball went up in the air, it seemed like it stayed up in the air forever, man. I'm sitting in my seat watching it, like, what?
Well, Greg, thank you, man, for those memories. For those 5 Eastern Conference Final Series is great. And again, I appreciate you for coming on, and let's hope the Knicks, man, can try to get that championship or get to the finals. So thank you again. Appreciate you. For everyone's watching and listening, this is another special edition here on the KSN Podcast. I'm your host, Kurt the Magnificent. Peace, love. You already know. Have a good night, y'all.